Welcome back to the Now Morning Show. The conversation continues this morning, focusing on the attempted coup in 1990. And joining us to discuss some unforgettable moments of the same is Senator Dr. Paul Richards, also broadcaster. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Natasha. Good morning, Ruckus, and good morning to your team at TTT.
Thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you so much for joining us. Let's get straight into the conversation this morning. Where were you and what were your initial thoughts when the 1990 attempted coup started?
Well, I started my broadcast career as a technical operator with NBS Radio. So I was actually, the interesting thing about it is that on that Friday I usually was the technical operator and producer for a show called Program One, which was a countdown show at 6 o'clock, where we usually did it live, 5 to 6, sorry. We usually did it live. For the first time in about 5 years, we recorded that show at 2 p.m. that day for some providential reason, and left the studio at about 3:30 and went home, only to hear the confusion start to unfold. Interestingly enough, one of my nephews, my eldest nephew, his father was a police officer, and there was a football match on at the stadium that day. And he called at around 4 o'clock to ask where his son was, my nephew. And we found it strange. And he said if we get onto him time to go home on time, which was very strange at the time. But of course, looking back now, clearly there was some information on his end that something was happening. But I was actually at home after having left NBS Radio, which is on Abercrombie Street, or was on Abercrombie Street. It's now a Guardian car park, by the way. And so around the corner, all this confusion was happening. And so by the time it started to unfold on television, on the TTT newscast, anchored by Dominic Calipasad at that time, we realized what was happening in the country. So we were all put on alert because an attack was also made on NBS Radio, where they tried to get into the building and they threw Molotov cocktails on the ground floor and the first floor in a studio that was just built called Studio C. But the security were able to wrangle them out of the building, the Muslimin at the time I'm talking about, and secure the building. And then police officers came, or army officers came, and kept the staff who were on duty, including Dennis McCormick and many others, safe while they continued to broadcast accurate information as opposed to some of the inaccurate information that the Muslimin, led by the late Abu Bakr, was transmitting on television about the government had fallen and all of that. So that was a very pivotal from my colleagues at NBS Radio at the time. And of course, by the night time, we were all put on alert to stand by to go down to man the station on shifts as technical operators and as the people on the air, the broadcasters, because we were in contact with Camp Upton, I think it is, from the army personnel who had started to work with the politicians of the day to resume the country to its state of democracy. Thank God the democracy never really fully fell. And, guests previously had a significant role to play in that, and police officers and other persons, including the late President and Prime Minister Ian Robinson.
Now, Senator Richards, when you mentioned that at nighttime you would have been sent down to man the station, what was the general feeling like with those who were involved?
Well, those who were there were under great stress, because you would imagine that people are trying to overthrow your democracy, your country. You are getting information that the sitting prime minister had been shot. There are hostages in the Red House. There are hostages in TTT. And there are people who, the buildings blown up, people are dead. Looting had started in some parts of the country. So it is the worst scenario for any country possible. So when you're hearing all these things, the anxiety levels are high, but you get a sense that if you are called to be a part of going against this horrible tirade, you have to act in the interest of the country. So we were on standby, and eventually the shifts were supposed to change, I think 24 hours or so after, or thereabouts. And we were told to get ourselves down to opposite the Central Market. There was a police station there, police outpost there, where they used to house cars that were wrecked or towed away. So right up on the southern end of the highway there, opposite the Central Market, we met there. I was dropped off there and we were waiting for buses to shuttle us into Port of Spain. And interesting enough, while we were waiting, there was an attack. Muslim people came down the river behind that outpost and started firing shots. So we had to drop to the floor. Police said, "Don't get up until we tell you," and they subdued that little incident there. We got into the buses. We were all told to stay very low. Do not raise up your head on the seat. We drove very slowly into Port of Spain, which was a ghost town because it was locked down in those first few hours, the days following the Friday. And the bus pulled up in front of the NBS building. I think it's 17 Abercrombie Street, if I'm not mistaken. And we were told the soldiers got out and police and formed kind of barricades because they said there were snipers all over. And we had to be careful, even leaving the bus, running into the building, which we did. And getting into the building, those who were on shift came out and were taken out by the same bus, which took them back to the point where their families would have picked them up. And even in the building, there was a sense of, I don't know how to describe it. It's such an ominous feeling that something really bad had happened, obviously. And even the front of the building, we were told not to go near windows because there were snipers and we could have been shot. But I have to really commend the police and the army who took control and manned and protected us while we did our duty. But it was something else.
It really is something else. I think just definitely had to take a moment there when you expressed some of the conditions, of course, that you and those involved would have had to have worked under in such a stringent time. And of course, kudos to you and everybody else who was involved to being able to compose themselves and continue to really allay the concerns, as we know this would have been the main medium for the general public to have those updates as well. Senator, post the attempted coup in 1990, what lessons do you think Trinidad and Tobago has learned or hopefully learned from the experience?
Well, a couple lessons. One, I've said this already on the air, and I think that the lack of consequence for those who perpetrated this treasonous act against the state and the people of Trinidad and Tobago, the lack of, to me, concrete consequences was a turning point, an inflection point for criminal activity in this country. And I really believe that if you look at the timeline, there was a sense, I guess, by some who were hell-bent on doing what they want against the laws of the country that, well, I could get away with shooting a prime minister, trying to overthrow a legitimately elected government, blowing up a police station, killing people, holding the country to ransom. And it went downhill after that, one. Two, that the brave men and women of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, a lot of the times, especially police service, come under a lot of examination and critique in the country. But on that day, and in those days following the attempted coup, they rose to the challenge. They did what they were supposed to do in this country's, what we could easily consider this country, one of this country's, if not this country's darkest hour. And they need to be commended for that. There's a movie or a documentary that the police service created, in which the officers of the city police service who were involved and who were held hostage and who had to go through the trauma of that and who had to stand their ground and protect and serve, did so magnificently and courageously. But it traumatized them. And years after, they had not received counseling. So we have to commend them for that. That's the lesson about very often our armed forces, our security forces are there for us. And they rose to the occasion. And thirdly, that we have to be vigilant against the potential for this happening again. Everybody says, well, it can happen again. It won't happen in the same way. But if we drop our guards in this country, and there is a growing sense of the levels and the types of crimes that we're seeing now, almost have us in a similar sense of siege and anxiety. And we really have to do a lot to arrest it, to protect our democracy. Because if we can't feel safe going out onto the streets in our everyday lives, we are, in a sense, under some sort of siege. And this is not casting aspersions to stick any authority or anyone, but we have to understand the importance of a safe and secure and vigilant society to protect it for generations to come. Because this is a beautiful country. We have a lot of, so many beautiful attributes. I mean, the national instrument that was just, the bill that was passed in Parliament, all those things show that against the grain, against the challenges, this country always rises to the occasion. And that day, it showed what Trinidad and Tobago was made of and is made of, and the potential we have as a country moving forward to rise to any challenge and protect ourselves as a nation and our values.
And thank you so much, Senator Dr. Paul Richards, for sharing. And thank you so much for joining us this morning as well. Thank you for your service to Trinidad and Tobago.
And thank you and Raucus for your entertainment on the stage recently. I saw you both soon to be Emmy Award-winning and Tony Award-winning actors. So.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
But I enjoyed it very much. Let me say so, happy African emancipation to everyone. And to those who gave and sacrificed on that day, including everyone, the police, the army, the politicians, whoever was involved in saving our democracy that day, I want to send a personal thanks to everyone and continue to be vigilant in this country.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator. Have a wonderful day.
Same to you and your colleagues.
Senator Dr. Paul Richards, broadcaster, sharing with us some memorable moments from the 1990 attempted coup. Stay tuned. There's more coming up after this break.